transitioning to postgraduate programming.
Pleasure meeting you.
You too.
Natalie, if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem. So my name is Natalie, and I am an instructional assistant. I work actually directly in the high school with Deb and Mrs. Muller, and so I wanted to join in and expand my knowledge.
It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm always wanting to extend me some more knowledge. I'll never know it all. There's always lots to gain from any and everyone. Everybody has a piece of the knowledge that's worthwhile sharing.
And Sarah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, my name is Sarah. I work at Cabrini University in their disability support office. So I see students once they transition into college from special ed programs. So just kind of also looking to expand my knowledge and learn a little bit more.
Oh, and indeed, that's a key part of transition. Once they moved on to have some of those supports in place.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I work with a caseload of about 20 students who are registered with our office for weekly support.
Okay. And the other person here is my husband, because I was worried that the link was not working. So, all right. So I will go ahead. These are just the slides that I share to let you all know that this is recorded. So as Dr. Fields is speaking, you know, please have yourself muted. But since we are such a small group, she has so much information to share. I think discussion would be amazing. So know that we want to hear from you. And I learned a cool trick that if you mute yourself and you press the space bar, it's like holding down an intercom, so you don't have to go around your mouse looking for the mute button. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't work when you're presenting, but if you have something quick to say, that's been kind of fun. All right. So I am going to stop sharing my slides. Dr. Fields, if you want to try to share your slides, and then I will press record and we will officially begin.
Okay. And again, thank you so much for coming. And I appreciate having you here. And you know, the awesome thing about it, the fact that those who didn't come, they can still get a piece of your conversation and mine. So I know we all have something of value to share today. And a topic that I came up with when I started thinking of transition was transition, preparing students for what's next. Because they're all getting ready to be young adults out there. And you were working in college, you are experiencing them as young adults, and we're piece by piece preparing them to be able to operate as efficiently and as effectively as possible and to have as much success to the greatest extent possible. So let me change this to a slideshow.
And if I could just introduce you a little bit further.
Okay, go ahead.
So welcome to Exceptional Circumstances for Exceptional Learners. It's been about a month since our last episode, because as you all know, we are in the midst of starting up the 2020-21 school year, and it has been quite an adventure. But I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Fields. We came in contact through the Council for Exceptional Children discussion group. And I am constantly looking for ways to help my students transition. And through the COVID experience, one of the main things that I've been really thinking about is, what is the purpose of education? Why are we doing this to begin with? And I think that while transition plans are a very important part of the IEP process, we really should be thinking about transition for all students, regardless of disability. So Dr. Fields is a native of St. Louis, Missouri. She has served in the field of special education at the high school level, and her motto is such an inspiration to me. It says, the empowerment for life through the acquisition of knowledge. And I love that you're all here today because you're looking for just that, for more knowledge. So I was able to come across her book, Transition Ahead, Lesson Plans for Life Beyond High School. And honestly, some of these lessons I wish I had before I became an adult. So I'm really looking forward to today. We spoke about a month ago, and I've been so excited about today's presentation. So without further ado, Dr. Fields, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're such an humble servant in this field of special education. So I am honored to be able to participate. And thank all of you after such a busy day. It's kind of rough. We're dealing with COVID and whether to do virtual teaching or to do it from home. And things are kind of different than what we're normally used to. But in spite of all of that, you had such an eagerness to gain extra knowledge that you wanted to come and share, and we can share information with one another. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. And I don't take it lightly. After a long day, it speaks much of you to want to come in and participate in this particular session. So first of all, I wanted to show a picture of where I am from. Born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Went to college in St. Louis. And I'm just welcoming you to St. Louis over the internet. From my home to yours, welcome to this session that you are participating in. And thanks again so much for joining with me. And what we're talking about today is transition. When we think of the word transition, we think of change, what's next. We think of planning, we think of goals. Sometimes we think of stress because you're stepping into new territory that maybe you haven't gone into before. Like right now, we are transitioning into the virtual movement temporarily in the school system. Students who we are serving will be dealing with transitioning into adulthood. So it's all about helping to provide a way and means for them to go into it in a positive way, a strategic way. And we're required to help them as special educators to equip them with knowledge. And part of that knowledge is not just about math, science, English, social studies, it's about getting ready for life. So transition, we're helping our students to get ready for that next part of living, because eventually these students will be assuming their positions in society.
I really love the word butterfly there, because I really love the word butterfly there, because I always think of, you know, how a caterpillar, as small and, you know, as it eats its way and gains, I think of the hungry caterpillar. And if we can think about that through knowledge, to think what we can all become. I really like that that's in that word bubble there.
And I think that is excellent. And before I go any further, did anyone else want to share on what thoughts are stimulated when you look at this slide that I have up right now?
For me, that word challenge, I think people don't always remember to challenge students. They just want them to get enough, whatever enough is, and go. But how about you challenge them to do a little bit more?
Oh, I'm all for that. Because there is no one size fits all. And some need a little bit more challenge. Some need a little less, and you meet them where they are and take them to the next level. Okay, you had something to say, Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's the motivation. It's not only motivating the student, but it's motivating ourselves to think outside the box. That's like, I think 99% of my job is what it feels like, is to think outside the box.
Okay.
And find solutions that aren't necessarily fitting in the traditional mold of this is how we should educate.
Okay. And I really thank you for sharing some of your ideas too, because this makes you think of a lot of stuff. Transition, it can make you think of positive things, but can also make you think of negative things. But then when you think of negative things, then you need to think of what types of things need to be in place so that the outcome is not negative. Outcomes do not have to be negative. They can be positive. A lot of it is what we put in place to deal with what's coming next. And we're going back to why are we even dealing with this in the first place? As special educators, we're dealing with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And with that, we're assuring a free and appropriate education. And one of you had mentioned that some students need a little bit more, some need a little less. So we'll make sure it's appropriate based upon the need of the student, which goes into that next part, unique needs of students served. And that's why we've been doing IEPs and 504 plans in some places, because we're looking at not just anybody with this disability needs X, Y, and Z, but how does this student interact with the challenge that he or she is experiencing, and what does he or she need to help in thriving in whatever atmosphere they're dealing with, from class to class, or from session to session, or from activity to activity in school. We help to prepare students for further education, employment, and independent living. All that is part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it says that it must include transition services by the age of 16. And although the law says 16, different school districts and states are able to be more strict and stringent. Such as I come from St. Louis Public Schools, that's where I work. And the federal law says age of 16, we do all students in high school. I'm not sure if that's the same for all of you, but you know, get a head start on what's going on as far as transition. And transition services don't look the same for all students. So it's a coordinated set of activities for a student with a disability and I will allow you to take a look at that instead of me reading it verbatim, but we're trying to get them ready for college later, if they're gonna do that, work later, if they're gonna do that, independent later. All of those things, post-secondary education, and work and employment, all that has to do with independent living. They all tie together and intermingle. So we are trying to prepare in all three areas. Often on the IEP, it'll say independent living goal. And if a student doesn't have an IQ of less than 70, then we'll often leave it blank, but we all stand some independent living goals. There are some dumb mistakes that we made at times because we didn't know. So it's all about being equipped with knowledge to help you to make wise decisions so that you'll be able to thrive to the greatest extent possible. And IDEA is asking for that. And it's not only just looking at trying to get them to the next step, but what is the student good at? What do they prefer? What are they interested in? I actually ran a transition program on a college campus. I had 12th graders from all over St. Louis Public Schools. They'd come once a week and we would discuss, where are you going from here? And I would always share with them that mom may have an idea, dad may have an idea, teacher may have an idea, but our job is to create you to be analytical and to be thinkers and hear what's being said, but see what's a good fit for you, because at the end of the day, you're gonna have to live that thing on your own.
Absolutely,
Hey.
and I definitely can, I can think about many IEP meetings that I've sat in, and you ask the child what they like and what their preference is, and they'll say like, well, my mom thinks I should be an engineer. And you're like, okay, well, what do you think? And they're like, I haven't thought about it. And it makes me wonder, you know, what do we do in the school system to help kids start to think about what their strengths are? And if they have a strength, do we promote it? Or do we stick to just regular curriculum because that's what we're used to and that's what we're good at? So.
Yeah, and that is important because it goes back to it's not a one size fits all. And sometimes students will have an aspiration, but then we have to, as educators, cause them to reflect on what's required to get into this. What will connect now with the future where I'm trying to go? And do I have a reasonable plan that will help me to get there? And we are to make them to think, because that's extremely important. They're thinking instead of someone saying, you will do this, and okay. It's about them buying in. Buy-in is so important, because even when you have a person who does professional counseling with us, sometimes the idea is not to advise and say, do this, do that, do that. The idea is to stimulate the person to thinking about what's going on. Where do I want to be in life? What do I want to accomplish? How can I do it? And is this a good fit for me or not? So I want to focus on this particular presentation on the instructional part, because we know with transition, we deal with related services to thrive. Community experience students, we get connected with different adult agencies who will help facilitate different needs that need to be met as young adults. But today I want to talk about instruction. Instruction, I have seen earlier in my years of teaching, and main people they focused on were students who had an IQ of 70 and below. But you know, I had an eye-opening experience when I was sent to Prince George's County. That was out in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And our executive director of special ed sent 3 of us to kind of observe and talk and watch and see what's going on and maybe pick up a few ideas, because she came from there. And then I saw students of all different ability levels interacting with their levels of transition-related instruction. And it was not limited to 70 and below IQ. So let's talk about transition-related instruction and its relevance. Because when I'm going back into talking about not just about IQ, any of our students in special education, they have an IEP. And since they have an IEP, they also have transition plans. So if we can, that's a good time to get some information into them that will help them to thrive. So talking about the relevance, teaching is a work of heart. And when we work with students, it's not just about I give, they receive. It's because we care, we love them, we want to make a difference, we want to have an impact. We care about their success. And the biggest testimony is when you may go to the grocery store several years down the road and a student walks up to you and shares their success story. Hey, yeah, I'm working at such and such and I'm doing this. And then it makes you kind of look back and reflect, you know, I did make a difference. And it's good to know that we are impacting lives, not just for right now in our classes while we're passing out grades, but for futures. Various forms of transition-related instruction are beneficial for all students with or without disabilities. Often you hear of transition classes being for students with disabilities, but there are different forms of transition. Any classes that have nothing to do with disability, it just has to do with getting students ready for what's next. And even in general ed, they realize that it's important to equip students for what's next, even if they don't have an IEP or a disability. That's why you have classes like College Summit. That's why you have career and technical education and courses like that, because general ed acknowledges the importance of transition.
So I currently teach the transitional math class. And, you know, so much of it is just review of all things math to help them get ready for the college entrance exams. And it's one of those things that math can actually prevent a child from going into a field that they thought that they enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that perhaps their senior year shouldn't be the first time we're talking to them about the skills that they need to go into that field or the thing that they're anticipating making a career.
And coming to think of it, when you think of the transition plan that you see in an IEP, there's a page. And for us, we have a 4-year plan. We're actually looking at, this is where a student is. This is where a student wants to go. Here's some pieces to maybe introduce various students to bits and pieces of where they're wanting to go. There may be some classes, there may be some experiences that they might want to partake of that will give them a little taste of what they may be interested in doing in a career. So I think that it's good to not just wait until senior year when they're getting ready to leave school. Because sometimes even in college, students will take classes and be very excited about it and then decide, well, you know, this really isn't me. So I think I want to do something different. And what you're saying, sharing earlier, will give students a chance to assess along the way if this is a goal that they want to maintain or they want to adjust.
Experiences are everything, right?
Yes.
Like I thought I wanted to be a marketing major and I got a little part-time job at some place and said, this is not for me. So, and I constantly encourage my students, you better try it before you buy it, right? Because when you're going to get a degree or even a certificate, you're spending time, you're spending money. You might want to see what that looks like, because you might think that, you know, you really want to, I don't know, work in a sneaker factory because you love sneakers, and then you go and look at it and you're like, I don't know about that. So go see it. And I know so many companies are very willing to have individuals come in and to give them tours or to connect. Now it looks a little bit different right now with the online world. In some ways, I think it opens up more possibilities. In some ways, you know, I'm curious to see what the limitations may or may not be.
Well, those days will return. And I guess we have to be flexible and creative in knowing how to get students an inside peek without actually being in some of those places, which I'll talk about a little bit later in my presentation, because we have had to make tremendous changes because of COVID. And a lot of the face-to-face interactions that were taking place out in the community are not able to take place. Such as when I had students coming to me in my program, off campus, they go to school and then they would catch public transportation and come to me. But right now, they're not sending students out because of COVID. So I understand it, but this is a season, seasons change. Those days will return. So we just have to be positive about how can we deal with this situation as best as possible right now, while we're looking forward to greater days later. So here's some benefits of transition-related instruction. Knowledge is power. Knowledge grants power to make informed choices that can make a positive difference in transition-related outcomes. Because many of us have made mistakes because we just didn't know, but we had an idea that a certain thing was going to cause a horrible problem and maybe really set us back and interfere with where we're headed. Then we may have avoided certain things. So it's good to have options and ideas in mind and know what's behind those options and ideas, the pros and cons and stuff like this, so that informed choices can be made. Tough decisions ahead. So we help students increase in awareness in making decisions, weighing pros and cons and alternatives, because I always speak to my students about not only do you want to do this, but you need to have an alternative plan in mind. What if this doesn't turn out like you wanted? You don't want to have to start from square one. You want to have an idea already built up in your head of, and that if this doesn't work, maybe I'll check this out. And not just I'll check it out, but I'll check it out because they should have some type of reason instead of doing it because their friends did it. It should be some type of personal fit and gratification in whatever they're choosing to do.
You mean not all of my students are going to get to pro baseball?
And I've had some too that say, I'm gonna be a basketball player. And I get it. And I don't believe in being a dream killer. I believe in, yes, I'm excited about your dream too, but you need to also think of something else to fall back on in case that does not materialize for you. How have some of you dealt with that when students come up with particular careers that maybe they may not be able to get qualified to do?
Like that you just said, the whole, I'm going to be a professional football player or a basketball player. How about go on the school team first? That's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't often do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens when you, not that I want you to get injured, but you get an injury and you can't play anymore. So I sort of throw down that, you know, accidents happen, and I try and come up with a player who may have had an injury recently, and so maybe they can see that that's a real thing and not just some grown-up telling them no.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part, I think. I had a kid once tell me that she wanted to go to college to become a lawyer, and her reading level was a grade 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the mom couldn't comprehend it. So she didn't really understand what we were saying. So we evaluated her. We didn't need to. We'd evaluated her.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat with them and I explained the reality of it. And it was heartbreaking because the girl really was so sad, but the mother understood. So once mom understood and was on board, we could explain to her what she could do and how she can compensate, and she can get
Mm-hmm.
books on tape and the things, audio on the computer. And so then she had an idea that maybe she wasn't going to be able to go to 7 years of college, but there were things that she could do to be successful in life and other things that she liked.
And
It's
there may have
hard-
been
it's
other things
heartbreaking.
related to law.
So we talked about being a paralegal,
Mm-hmm.
but that's hard if you have writing and reading issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But there are ways to practice that.
Mm-hmm.
So there were ideas in her head that she could do things to not just go work in the supermarket the rest of,
Right.
because that's what she was doing. She said, I want to do that. I said, okay, I don't want you to do that if you don't want to do that. So let's come up with options. You know?
It's about looking at where you are and seeing how it will connect with a potential dream. And if it does not connect with that potential dream, how can that dream be modified so some type of connection can still take
Yeah.
Well, for me personally, the thing that I really connected with is like, do you guys realize that most average NFL, professional sports players, their careers are about 10 years? And you've only lived about, 18 years. So most people's careers don't last as long as you've been alive.
Mhm.
So what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I kind of lead with that, and that helps them go down this avenue of like, oh, wait, it's a shorter time span that you're looking at. And it's because sometimes they're looking at it on such a micro level. I just try to bring it to the macro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And it's all about looking at what can I really do? How fulfilling and how rewarding will this be for me long term? And what you're speaking about, if that career ends, then it will no longer really be rewarding. So you have to weigh out, we have to equip the students to analyze all that type of stuff. What do they want to do? What does it take to get there? And maybe even lay out, this is where you are right now, but this is where you have to be if you want to get there. So it's about critical thinking, and that helps to provide reality checks for our students, as opposed to saying, you can't do that.
Right. Don't remove the dream, make them think more deeply about it.
Okay. So another reason for transition instruction is we're trying to help them to learn how to self-advocate. How do they look out for themselves? Some students will have adult resource providers, but some students are functioning at a higher level, but they still have challenges. And those students will have to compete with students who do not have disabilities and get out there and thrive and be competitive in the work world. So while we have them, it's about teaching self-advocacy. It's about teaching coping skills so that if they have a dream or if they have some type of goal they want to accomplish, what do you do so you can be resilient? What do you do when you fall short? Instead of saying, oh, forget it. How do you assess if this is worth finding another plan, reapproaching it in another way, or shifting to something different? So that's important for us to cover some of that as we're dealing with transition-related instruction with students as they're going towards meeting goals, personal goals and knowing when, why, and how to amend them, because sometimes they do have to be changed. And we equip them with soft skills because they'll need jobs. And when they're on a job, they need to know how to get a job, keep a job. Because I know I've made mistakes that have caused me problems on jobs. I guess we all have. And the more you know, then you can make better choices. When you could think of consequences that go with certain actions and all of this, think more critically and not just think about it, but while you are studying transition and while you're preparing them with transition instruction, maybe coaching them towards thinking of strategies of how they would deal with various situations and scenarios out there in the workforce that they may encounter, so that even if there's a disagreement, that doesn't have to be the end of their career or their job. And there's a way to navigate through and around that and keep it moving. And that's part of the self-advocacy piece. But the more they're equipped with knowledge on knowing how to deal with difficult situations, maybe that'll limit some of the terrible mistakes they could make and get fired perhaps, and have to start from ground one again, trying to get a job.
I think it's interesting. I'm thinking about that a lot because I have some kids in the virtual learning that are more likely to ask for help than if we were in class together. And then I have others who just don't say a word ever. And I'm curious to know that with the challenges that we currently have, are kids building better soft skills? Or is it going to get in the way for some kids? It's all very right now, so we can't see into the future. But for some kids, I think that it could be a benefit because they really don't have a choice, because there's not a teacher that's going to walk up behind them and say, hey, you need to go check this question. If they have any bit of that intrinsic motivation, which is so hard to teach, will that help them? Will this environment help them get those skills quicker out of necessity? That's a total open-ended question. I have no idea, but it's something I'm thinking about.
And sometimes you never know what they're listening to, even if you're not formally doing a transition class. If you're sharing bits and nuggets with them, you never know what a student has held on to, and it pops up in their memory right at the right time to assist them through a dilemma that they are encountering. So I would say keep sharing, and then hoping that as you share, some of it will stick. Some of it will become internalized, where that student buys in and says, I think this will work for me. And we're trying to get a student to that point where they'll have the buy-in, because people in general are more likely to follow through in action once they have a buy-in, as opposed to doing something because someone else told them to do it or not to do it, because it has become a part of them. And basically we're equipping students to become contributing members of society, and I put on there within their own levels of ability. So just because one student may need more help than another does not mean that they're not contributing members in society. So the idea is contribute as best as you can. So help the students see where they are and try to build the student to the next level as they're preparing for life. Here's a quote I came up with a few years ago, and I like to refer back to that, because you think in terms of disability, but I would like to challenge you to think of it in terms of ability. And here's my quote, and it's that all people fit along a continuum of ability that varies from task to task and time to time. So there are some things that some of our students with IEPs can do better than we can, and vice versa. It depends on what it is. So it's all about where do you fit along that continuum. And that applies to our students. Where do you fit along that continuum of ability? And because there's a continuum, then we will personalize how we're helping the students. Of course, we'll share some of the same things, but some may need a little bit more support to grasp what you're talking about.
I think everyone needs to see this right now on the online learning format. I love the task to task and time to time. Like right now with varying in levels of anxiety and what you're dealing with in your home. You know, I think sometimes when we're not performing at the top levels that we're used to, we feel like we're failing. But that's not necessarily true. It's just where you are at this time on this task for right now.
Yes.
And I think that's such an important thing. It's kind of a flip of the way that you think about things, because for so much of, you know, you're told you're either good or bad. And then so it's a little bit of that growth mindset, the work that has been done over the last 10 years or so. But, you know, thinking about an ability versus a disability, you know, I feel like when there's something wrong, we like to zoom in on that and stay there.
Okay.
And I think that it's so important that we find the things that we are doing well and pick that up and, you know, remember that if we're in a slump, it's only for now. Like you said, the seasons change, right?
Yes.
And I just think that even in our own lives, like kids, I've seen kids in 7th grade where I'm thinking, I don't know what's going to happen. How are they going to go to high school? And what you said, I see them, you know, 3, 4 years after that in the grocery store, and I can't believe who they've become. So just because you were a certain way in 7th grade does not mean that's who you're going to graduate as.
And it's about how able are you. And to piggyback off of what you are speaking about, I'm thinking of the time I went to the Council for Exceptional Children convention in San Diego. And on my last day, I took a different route from my hotel to convention center. I said, I think I'm going this route. I think I want to get me a t-shirt that says San Diego. So then I went into this gift shop and I started looking around, and then I heard Miss Fields. I'm thinking, who in the world knows me all the way in San Diego? And it was a student I had on my caseload at Sodan International Studies High School. And he said, this is my shop. You're my mom. I did really well. And as I got here and got my money together, I bought this shop. And then I would bring family members here one by one. And the mom was so excited. She came from the back, taking pictures. And he said, be my guest. You're my mom. And I just thank you for all that you did. And you know, I just boo-hooed all the way to Convention Center on that one. I will remember that forever.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, because he used to be one, he reminded me, yeah, I used to always be in trouble and you never gave up on me. So
you know,
yeah, that's stuff.
And that's something to really think about, because sometimes the kids that give you the hardest time, they're the ones that, you know, actually are paying more attention to you. Because if they're trying to give you a hard time, it means they care enough to get your attention. It just it might just not be in the right way.
So transition-related instruction, therefore, is also seen as important while knowledge is being shared in high school. Here I have the different subjects: math, science, English, history, literature. Transition is important too, because many of your high schools have ACT prep. What is that? That's transition classes for post-secondary education. When you think of it, they're not calling it transition, but it is preparing for life after high school. We're doing it too, and so are they. So all students could benefit from preparation for life. Special education, sometimes they'll have specific courses that deal with getting ready for life afterwards. And other times they won't, they'll have various experiences that deal with getting ready for life afterwards. And so does general ed. Some of our students with IEPs participate in some of these gen ed courses and take advantage. And some of them will get it in specified courses and special ed that address transition, including students who are in functional academics curriculum, which are students in 70 and below IQ, then that's kind of embedded in. But I thought about, what about that gap of students who function higher than that, who are not getting these pieces here? So that's where I came from with deciding what types of things would this group need. And if I have the opportunity to share more transition with some of these groups who may not go to some of those gen ed offerings, but they're not getting what special ed is doing, what could I do? What could special education do differently so that the group who are over 70 IQ would also benefit and not fall between the cracks when it comes to transition? So we meet students where they are and then build. I have a picture of a globe, and there are people from all over holding this globe. And I'm speaking about how all people make the world go round. We do, and so do our students. So then we are preparing them, looking at where are they right now and what can I help them to do to get to the next level, and where can I point the way so they continue that journey and growth.
So I do want to point out some of the things that are featured in your book.
Okay.
So you have it broken down into the 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is post-secondary academic preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm looking down to see, is there anything specifically special ed? And it's really, every kid should have this, because as a person who was first generation going to a college, I was so lost in so much of the college process. I just did whatever my brother did, and that didn't really work for me, but I didn't know what else to do. So I just love, taking strategies, knowing what the services that a university has. What does it mean if you want to change the college? Like, if you make a choice and you find it's a mistake, are you stuck there? So Sarah, I don't know if you're still here, but we had a conversation recently. What do you feel like when they get to the college? What things are kids missing the most?
I think some of the things that I see that they're missing the most is a lot of the students that I meet with, in all honesty, don't truly understand their IEP or how their learning disability impacts them. And I don't know if it's just because they're so used to having mom and dad in their IEP meeting that there's this disconnect. So we spend a little bit of time reviewing actually how their disability impacts their learning. And from there, we try and really build what they need in the classroom, because the accommodations look different in college than they do in high school. So usually we can kind of help bridge those gaps in things that were similar that they had in high school and bringing them into college. But sometimes they just don't know what accommodations are available to them. So that's just a big conversation. I think some colleges are really great at presenting to students what options they can utilize, and then some aren't. So I think our program in particular does a really good job sitting down with students and meeting with them individually to try and take some of the barriers out. Because I have some students who've never utilized using audiobooks, but they find that helps fill in the gap for them, even though they never saw it in high school. So there's some of the things that I've seen, either just not really understanding their IEP or not knowing what accommodations are out there that could help bridge that gap for them.
And I think that's why a lot of schools are going more towards teaching students how to lead their own IEP meetings, to develop that self-advocacy and develop more self-awareness so that they can advocate as he or she moves onwards. Because yes, that piece is critical. Knowing about yourself, knowing what makes you tick, knowing your challenges, knowing what you can do well, knowing how learning works best for you, and carrying that to the next step. So that's why, go ahead.
I think that some of the things that I've come across as kids who transfer into me through high school, or they come from another middle school, they're not having any kind of honest conversation yet, or they're their person who's case managing them, you know, whether it's a psychologist, a social worker, a learning consultant, someone's either afraid or not willing or not confident enough to talk with the student in an honest way, because you have to know why it is you're getting some kind of service to be able to know how to prepare for life. And I think that I try and explain that to any intern I ever get. You have to be honest, not rude, just honest, and help them understand what works for them, because you can't move forward if you don't know exactly what's impacting you.
And that's why exactly what you said is an express need for why transition-related instruction needs to take place to cover certain things such as what you're speaking of. Where a student could look at themselves individually, become more aware and familiar with their own IEP and what it has to do with their progress.
So does it have to be like a specific class, do you think? Is it embedded within classes? Like, I know I teach math, but I talk to kids all the time about, you know, how it's going to impact them and what are they thinking about and how, you know, they may use this skill in whatever job they're thinking about. You know, is it having workshops that kids can go to? Because really, when it comes to counseling, there's not enough time, right?
Right,
so
right.
Kids, you got to go through 100 kids and maybe they get 15 minutes every so often. You can only do so much. So in your experience, what has been the best format to delivering these plans? Because your chapter 2 talks about specifically career development, which I feel like even as an adult, when I go on an interview or have a conflict, I feel like I could go back and look at the videos that you have attached to kind of think about those things. It's constantly a work in progress. And then chapter 3 is quality of adult life. And like that first thing there, I see how to do a 1040 EZ income tax form, right? Which is, you hear people say, oh, they taught me algebra 2, but I don't know how to do my taxes. You know, so is it having a, you know, a specific course that anyone can take? Is it doing these little mini workshops? What do you think works best? Because there's a lot of really good information here that I don't know how to get to all of my students.
Okay, and I'm going to discuss some more of that later, but also I would think that all those ideas are very fruitful in getting it out. And it's about schools strategically deciding, how will I set it up? Will I have workshop time? Will I have college and career fairs and have workshops that are part of that? Will I utilize some of this information during advisory period where I have sets of students together who have IEPs? There are a variety of ways of making this happen. And some of you have mentioned just impromptu discussion. It doesn't all have to be formal. Even those informal pieces make a difference. And this goes back to what you were speaking about, Rebecca. Are there strategies or information you wish had been shared with you prior to leaving high school that you could have helped, that could have helped you to make decisions and avoid some costly errors or mistakes? And I think of my program at Harris Stowe. I would teach my students in one of the conference rooms, and there were some students there who were not part of my program, but overheard our classroom conversations. I said, boy, I wish someone had gone over some of that with me. I really did some messed up stuff because I didn't know any better about certain things. So yeah, when we think of things that we wish we would have gotten better help with, some of our students need those things even more. And it's important to find ways to get it in. I just listed a couple of literature references speaking about why transition instruction is so important, and that it should be explicit, systematic, and applied to help students get self-determination skills. And that students with disabilities will have more problems with employment rates than peers without disabilities. And those are other reasons to make sure that if we can, to get some transition related instruction in. So here's some opportunities, and you already brought up a few of them, so we can share some transition instruction. Okay, transition material embedded within academic coursework. Dedicated coursework within special ed and general ed curriculum. I know in our district and in many other districts, if you could come with an appropriate write-up for a class, you could create it and make it become a part of course offerings. So that's a possibility if you're in school districts that'll have a buy-in to that, of creating a transition class, and not just one where they're wasting time, but where student can get some type of elective credit or something that can go towards their high school diploma. So my program, when they would come to me from different high schools, and I do the seminar, and then they'd have their work experience along with college work study students, then, along with college work study students, then this gave them a chance to kind of see firsthand what's going on. And also, field trips, enrichment sessions, pre-activity before attending supervised work experiences. I want to talk about all those things, workshops, all those are ways. But field trips, you could do virtual field trips, you could do in-person field trips. You can have enrichment sessions before school, after school. Sometimes there's activity periods after school where this take place. You could have job shadowing, internships. Sometimes you can't get there, like right now, you're not able to access all of that because of COVID, and you're not able to go inside, but there are some ways to do some of that virtually as well. But back to that dedicated coursework, it is important that if that's really important to you and your school district will allow you to create a course that the student can get credit, then you'll have specific time allocated to get that instruction in. Because when I give my students a grade, they get an elective course credit grade, there's actually part of our course offerings that has a listing that I can attach what happens when they come to me with what happens on their high school transcripts, as far as grades and as far as it being averaged in with the rest of the coursework. Combination of seminar, work experience opportunities. Another thing I thought about is many of us have students who will go out and do work experience. Maybe while they are gathering, getting ready to go out into the community, that's a good time to get bits and pieces of some of this instruction in. But like the one that I observed in Prince George's County, they had it set up where students had to first spend an hour in their transition class, and then they would depart and go to their work experiences. So there are all types of combinations. Whereas with my particular program, when they come to me, I teach them in class, and then they would depart and go to various departments on the college campus.
Sarah, was there something you wanted to say?
I was just going to add in one thing that I found really interesting that our College Career Center does is there are certain local jobs in our area that are specifically looking for neurodiverse learners. So we've started to build those connections. So I think it's a really good transitional opportunity to make connections with these jobs that are specifically looking for neurodiverse learners.
Okay.
So
I think that's really good. And you know, when my students work along with some of the college work study students, then, you know, our students who go out and work, they get work experience, but they get it from a perspective of, if I go to college, this is something I can say I've done. And then they're mentored by peers because the college students are close to their age. So how about virtual instruction? Invite some guest speakers to online classroom to share firsthand experiences. So if you can find a way for your school to allow that type of time, and you invite a guest speaker to come in, then that speaker can share about their particular type of work. And then students can ask questions they've always been curious of. And the way you would develop a list like that is to get a feel for what the interests are of the students who you are servicing. Okay, view and discuss uploaded or online materials, videos related to transition related topics. So if you can put that stuff and upload it on Zoom or Google Meets or whatever format you have, or share the screen and where they can look at it, or they can pre-look at it and reflect upon it later, then that's another way to deal with that.
Yeah,
virtually.
and I love that in your book you list the the goal, the objective, what they're going to work on in their explicit instruction, like some of the key points, and then you have the websites and the videos available, so that that could be something that a school puts on a website so that the kids have access to all of these things. It's a very comprehensive. I'm very excited to see how we can use it in our school, because, you know, a lot of times it's just, there's so much to teach. Sometimes it's hard to narrow down the most important topics.
Right.
So being an educator and looking at the list that you've already compiled out of these 77 lessons here, I mean, that it really helps to kind of narrow down the things that kids need. So I'm very appreciative of the hard work that you did. We are running a little bit out of time. So I want to give you as much time as you need to kind of wrap up. If anyone needs to go, I understand. I value your time. We will continue to record and kind of have this available, but I just kind of wanted to be mindful of that.
Okay. So let me flip through really quickly. Virtual related instruction, I've listed virtual tours. That's a way to handle some of it. There are some online transition programs that include assessment that you can use in your classes virtually without actually being there. Introduce and engage with transition related content and activities that can be verbalized while online as a class. So you could talk about different content after maybe you had them to read on it, or after you had them to look at a film or a website you sent them to, and discuss it. So we're speaking of a call to action. We are all called to help equip our students get ready for life after high school in whatever way, even if it's just encouraging a student along the way. And we're called to teach and inspire. Major factors to consider: we empower students with knowledge, help them develop self-advocacy, and we assist them to mentally prepare for the future and create bridges that connect students with adult living. And I mentioned she's been speaking about my book, Miss Muller, and I also listed again my book and what is in it, and it's set up so that you don't have to go in any one set order. You don't have to do the whole lesson. You can pull bits and pieces depending on how much time you have available and what the ability level is of the kids. So a few thoughts for further reflection to prepare students for what's next. We're positioned as educators to help students grow in knowledge they can use to empower themselves strategically instead of haphazardly. Regardless of ability level, there is a benefit. Introduce scenarios they might encounter in the future and actions that might help them. And transition related information and insight, get it in where you can fit it in on purpose. So when a student's gain anything from what you taught and it influences a successful future, you have a reason to glow and know that it was all worth it. So seek positive outcomes through preparing for what's next. And thank you so much for your time and attention.
Those last few slides I want to print out and put behind me because they are such great reminders, right? That, you know, sometimes you feel like you're the only one that's trying to squeeze things in, but if we can all do just a little bit here and there, can get the kids to where they need to be. So I'm just so thankful that you spent so much time and really put a lot of love into this presentation. I had a college professor say that in order to teach them, right, you need to reach them. You need to connect with their heart. And I feel like from the first kind of phone call that you and I had, you definitely reached me with your experiences and what you shared. And I'm just so grateful for your time. I can't wait to dig into this and share it. I actually had my one of my supervisors reach out to say, you know, I can't come tonight, but can we sit down and talk a little bit more about this? So just know that your work is going to be with us throughout the year, and I hope that I can spread this to other folks so that they can get the benefit as well. So thank you once again.
I think we just ran out. Hello?
Nope, you're good. You're good. I think
Okay, I thought the thing froze. And I also want to remind you that a lot of the topics that I came up with, some came from my 30-something plus years of experience, but a lot came from my dissertation research, where I was going to other practitioners in the field and asking them, what do you believe should be taught to students with disabilities who are college bound that will help them attain successful transition related outcomes? So a lot of that was placed into the development of these lessons, a lot of my feedback that I received. So this from practitioners to practitioners.
Yeah, and I mean, so much comes from that discourse, the conversation, the back and forth, which, you know, we really have to seek out right now in these times. And I'm very grateful for this platform so that we can continue the conversations. And I wish you all a wonderful night. We got to get some rest so we can get up and do it all again tomorrow. So I appreciate all of you and taking your time at this very chaotic period, this season, if you will, in our teaching careers. And bless you all and have a wonderful night.
And to access this book, you can go on Amazon.
There you go. Perfect. I will post that with a link. It will go out to the Learning Revolution site and will be able, people can view at any time.